What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, here with yet another review for X-Men 97. This one's for episode 8, Tolerance's Extinction Part 1. So this is the first of the 3-part event that is going to conclude the season of X-Men 97 Season 1. Oh boy, there was a lot that happened in this episode, jeez! Episode 5 is a hard one to follow in terms of the scale, the action, like just the complete shock, but these last few episodes have been building up for something, and there were so many cool things in this episode. The story was really, really well done. It's progressing this story to the final part of this season. I think there's going to be a lot more surprises in store. Holy crap. There were so many cool things. Obviously, I'm going to jump straight into it and talk about it, but there was like cameos that I didn't expect to see that blew my mind. Like, just things that happened was just awesome to watch. And I grew up with this show, and like these characters, they just mean a lot to me, and like they essentially formed my childhoods. Like watching the X-Men was always one of my favourite things to do as a kid. This version of the X-Men, this is what I want to see in the MCU. If they can do this for animation for the X-Men, I want to see it in live action, because the way they've written these characters, like the way they're portrayed and that, so this is definitely the blueprint for it. And yeah, it's just made me realise why I love the X-Men so much, and why I just feel like something's been missing in the MCU for years. So I'm hoping that this is what they're going to use going forward, because the reaction to X-Men 97 has been mind-blowing. I don't think they thought it was going to be as good as it has been. And Marvel, if you're watching, you know, but take note, X-Men 97, this is what we want to see in live action, so please make it happen. But yeah, as always guys, I'm going to be jumping into the episode, talking about full reviews, my breakdown of it, talking, you know, what I think is going to happen, give you a bit of nerdy comic knowledge for those that maybe are just like casual fans, so I'll be doing that as well. As always, that right there, spoilers coming up. As soon as that pops up going forward, you know I'm talking spoilers, so that's your warning there. And if you watch it after, it's on you. It's on you. So yeah, I guess I'll just jump straight into it, won't waste any time, and I'll jump in with this review and breakdown. So let's get to it. So yeah, as I mentioned, this is Tolerance's Extinction Part 1. First part of a 3-part finale, which is going to divide the X-Men, I think, massively. I just think the things that have happened, things that are happening, and going into the last few episodes, I think we're going to see a very big division in the X-Men, because I think you're going to have the Magneto X-Men and you're going to have the Professor Xavier's X-Men, so it's going to be very, very interesting to see who's going to side with who. And I don't think it's going to be as obvious as it was before X-Men 97. Maybe you'd be like, oh, Cyclops will be with Xavier, Jean, Storm. Now I'm not so sure now. Things that certain characters have been saying in episodes, I'm thinking they're coming around to Magneto side of thinking, but I digress. We'll jump into it. The episode starts with Cable relaying some important information on Bastion and what happens in the future, and how the events in the future are 300 years from now, but it's starting to happen in the present. We also see that both Jean and Scott, they're in a much better place than they have been, and they're talking again, because obviously, you know, with the whole Madeline situation, it's just been very, very difficult for them. So it's good to see them starting back on track and actually having that relationship with each other again. Scott's obviously a bit distant at this point, because he said like Cable doesn't want to be in the same room as him. He's being distant, so Jean's trying to like console him. You can see that the two of them still care for each other, and they're just trying to work through this really difficult situation they're in. But it was just nice just to see them being a bit more sort of closer and actually talking. Obviously, it's been referenced about Madeline that we all assume she's dead. My rule with anything, whether it's animation, film, game, unless you see the body, they're not dead. We saw Gambit, so we know Gambit's gone, but Madeline could still be out there. As the episode progresses, we see that Jean sort of takes up this mother role for Cable, and then Scott tries to step up as the father figure, and then it'll be like this family unit. So that was something that was quite nice to see. And also, we know that when Bishop took Cable into the future, like in previous episodes, they were together. So obviously, with Cable back, everyone's like, well, where's Bishop? And it turns out the pair of them got separated in the time stream, so we don't know what's happened to Bishop at this point. And then we have a really cool scene where Cable explains to the X-Men who Bastion is and what essentially happens in the future. Turns out Bastion gets the backing from the government for his Prime Sentinel program after the events of Genosha, which was sort of the catalyst for him getting what he needed to get his program. Sort of similar to what Trask did with his Sentinel program during the Days of Future Past story. And we find out the Prime Sentinels are created with the same virus that Mrs. Sinister used on Cable as a baby. So we saw that, and which is the reason he has to go to the future in the first place. And then we also get this inkling, this is why Bastion needs Mrs. Sinister, because he needs that virus to create Sentinels, which turns living people into these Sentinels now. Beast mentions the Sentinels can give birth and essentially wipe out mutants. It's going to become this fight for survival again, like the X-Men have been doing for years. And Cable just lays it out saying if they don't stop Bastion now, then what he saw 300 years in his time in the future is going to happen in the present, and there'll be no stopping it. And then the Prime Sentinels will just hunt down mutants and wipe them out, and those that don't get wiped out will essentially become slaves, and we sort of see a reference to this in some future like flash forwards. Like I said, there's been loads of cool cameos in this one. The first cameo we really see, it's only a brief one, but we get to see Polaris, which is really cool to see her, and she was doing something to the Earth's magnetic pulse of her powers. Like I said, brief cameo, but it was just cool just to see her in the universe. Then we get a really important moment where the X-Men and Cable are talking about what's known as a fixed point in time, which has been referenced in previous projects before. If we go back to season 1 of What If with Doctor Strange, we find out like his absolute point in time was obviously Christine dying, and then he tries to undo this and essentially ends up destroying his own universe, which is basically what happens with any fixed point. If you try to undo it or you try to stop it, you will cause destruction to that universe. And then we get a little callback to the Doctor Strange film, the first one, when Beast mentions about Carmitage, which is obviously where we know where the Ancient One taught Doctor Strange and where Wong and all the sorcerers were during the Multiverse of Madness, defending against Scarlet Witch. So with this significance of an absolute point in time, this means that the attack on Genosha was a fixed moment. It had to happen, and it's something that can't be undone, which in a way kind of means that we probably won't be getting Gambit resurrected. We could see him come back in a different way, but if we do, it's not going to be through preventing Genosha, it might be through something else. And then you basically understand that whatever the X-Men, Cable or Bishop, whatever any of them try and do, they can't undo the attack on Genosha. And we saw in episode 5 when Cable tried to intervene, his tech malfunctioned and pulled him back to the future. And then Cable's AI tech explains that whenever he's tried to intervene, he just gets pulled back and confirms it's an absolute point, it can't be undone, and he's tried. Then Cable pulls up this map, which is I say a map, it's sort of like a hologram, but there's like a map reference on it, and it's important because essentially there's a part to me that looked like the Sacred Timeline, and then there's different logos on the timeline as well. You got the X-Men logo, you see Professor X, Magneto's logo, even Marvel Girl, who we know is Jean Grey, so that could be references to the point where Xavier found Jean when she was younger and took her in. Something else that X-Men 97 is actually noted under the Multiverse Saga on Disney+, which means they are part of the MCU, just not part of the main 616 timeline. They are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but just in their own little corner, so to speak. We then get a news report on the background of the TV, and it shows Professor X is alive, which kind of shocks the world because everyone, including the X-Men, believed that Xavier was dead. But this is obviously something that Bastion's done, and he's planted the seed that the X-Men lied to the world, and that he basically needs the humans to turn against the X-Men, which just means that they'll have a further need for this Sentinel program. Then after this, we switch upstairs to the mansion, and we see obviously Rogue's recovering from the attack by Trask when he turns to a Prime Sentinel, and she's bedridden. And this is the only part you really see her during the episode. She doesn't have any dialogue, she's just completely out of it. And then we do get a cool little scene with Nightcrawler and Jean, and then he gives more about his backstory, tells Jean that he's the son of Mystique, and then obviously, as we know, Mystique adopted Rogue, who became like her adopted mother, so she took her in and trained her, and then eventually she brought Rogue to Magneto, which we see in episode 5 before obviously all hell broke loose. And then we see that Nightcrawler explains that eventually he and Rogue find each other and realise they've got this connection, having the same mum, and that they view themselves as like siblings, and they form this brother and sister relationship, which we've seen a few times in this series. And then while Nightcrawler's open up, Jean also says that, you know, she opens up herself, saying she feels everything that Madeline did with the pregnancy as well as other things, and she still continues to feel with Nathan, with what's going on with Scott and just other things. And she said that even though she wasn't there, she feels like she was through Madeline, the psychic connection. And I think this is partly why she tries to take up this mother figure to Cable in the episode, because she still has all these memories and feelings that are obviously from Madeline, but I think she's just trying to embrace them now. Just really cool just to see the Summers family coming together in the episode, forming this like strong family unit. And there's a moment later in the episode we'll talk about where it's just awesome to see the three of them in action together. And then the episode switches to Bastion's headquarters, and we see Val Cooper. She survived the Genosha attack, I thought she hadn't, but yeah, she's still alive. And it just kind of confirms that she was working with Bastion, Mr. Sinister, who he's using Bastion to get his test subject. As we know, that's Mr. Sinister's whole ideal. Like, he wants to experiment on mutants, so he just basically wants to be feeding this addiction he has. And then we see Magneto's being held prisoner, and he is quiet. He doesn't say anything at all. He's just like chained up. So then Val tries to get him to talk, and she says to him like, she didn't know, I swear, and like referencing what Bastion did. Like, don't get me wrong, if you partner with someone like Bastion, there is no way you don't know whatever he's going to do is going to be something bad. Obviously, she probably knew something was going to happen, but not to the scale of like a genocide, and I think that's what she was trying to justify to him. And then we switch back in the episode to the Summers family, who are on a mission, and they arrive at Bastion's home. And this is where we learn about his backstory. It's slightly different to the comics, but then there's a lot that's kind of similar as well. So this is a bit of a nerd 101 here for you. So in the comics, the Sentinel Nimrod, who's been referenced in the series, he goes into the Siege Perilous with Master Mold, and they both get reborn as one individual, which essentially is Bastion. So he's a combination of Nimrod and Master Mold, which obviously we still had suspicions of anyway. As we see in these like flashbacks, Bastion doesn't remember his previous life and forgets he wants to eradicate mutants, and then as he gets older, he realises what his mission is, and he goes on to like eventually carry it out, which is what is happening in the present with him trying to get rid of the mutant race, and he just wants humankind to exist. And then we switch back to Bastion and Val at the headquarters again, and it turns out that Bastion was working with the United Nations, working with the world governments to get him to turn against mutants. So it's like this massive like plot trying to get rid of like the mutant race. More cameos galore, which is really awesome. Didn't expect to see these ones. We saw Doctor Doom, brief cameo, so cool seeing him in there. And then he was basically saying to Bastion that yes, I'm working with you, because he basically wants the X-Men out of his way, but he didn't know that he'd be participating in mass genocide. Now, even for someone like Doctor Doom, who's got a strict code, and I think he was like, look, I said we'd work together, but I was not ready to participate in this genocide attack. Also get to see Baron Zemo, so it's cool to see some cameos from him. They've just like part of this conversation, because obviously he's working with all these different people at this point, Bastion, and it just shows this expanding Marvel universe, which is really cool. One thing that I did take away from this point in the episode, they're all talking about this, and Magneto's just there. Now, Magneto's not saying anything, but he's listening to this, and you just know this is starting to fuel things inside his head, and he's understanding that this was a plot against mutants and Genosha. Knowing how the character Magneto is in the past, this would have sent him over the edge, and I think we might see the other Magneto return, and I think he's essentially going to give up on trying to live Xavier's dream, because this is going to be the point where he's like, mutants and humans can't coexist. At the end of the episode, you find out he's literally done. He's literally done with this, and I think he's going to try and do what he feels he needs to do for his race. And then we just see that most of these Prime Sentinels, they're just humans who have volunteered, and they get infected with this virus, and then they get activated and essentially go against the X-Men, which we see throughout the episode. Favourite scenes in the episode, it had to be the one with Nightcrawler and Wolverine, where they were going up against the Sentinels to protect Rogue. It was just so cool seeing two of them fight. Because I think one of the Sentinels says to Wolverine, oh, why do you resist? Like, basically, why are you fighting? And he's like, I've got 6 reasons. And then Nightcrawler pops in with 3 samurai swords, and he's like, no, we've got 9 reasons. And the two of them just go at it. It was so cool. The animation was just, like, such high quality at this point. And it was just cool just seeing the two of them fighting together and, like, battling. And it was just a really, really awesome set piece. So that was definitely a standout for me. And then we switch back to the Summers family and the Blackbird, which ends up getting destroyed. And they escape through a blue Porsche, which is quite funny. Bit of an Easter egg on the license plate. It says Slim. That was actually Cyclops' original name before he got changed to Scott. And then obviously we know throughout comics and different mediums, Wolverine always references Scott as Slim now and again. So that was just a cool little Easter egg. And then it turns out Val lets Magneto go as she realises he was right all along. But also because of what Bastion plans to do, she realised that she's going to need Magneto and the X-Men to fight against him, essentially try and save mankind. And then this is such a boss moment. We see Magneto go to the North Pole, where the Earth's magnetic current is the strongest. And he lets out this huge EMP which deactivates all the Prime Sentinels and power into the world, so the world is like in a blackout state. The guy has one bit of dialogue the whole episode, and after he does this, all he says is the word enough. It's the only word he has, but it was such like a boss moment, And it just signifies he's literally done. He's like done for this coexistence now, and he's just gonna do things he needs to do. And we got some more cameos. Now these are the ones that I really did not expect to see at this point. So obviously Magneto's done this EMP, and who do we see? We see the 1990 animated Spider-Man. Now, obviously, me being a massive Spider-Man fan, I was like, oh my god, this is the coolest thing in the world. Which signifies he's in this X-Men universe. And he just looks so awesome. Like, original design, they've upgraded the art and the animation for him as well. But it was just so cool seeing that he's in this universe. And I'm like, okay, we could be seeing Spidey in the X-Men now. Which makes sense, because in the original Spider-Man cartoon, the X-Men came in a few episodes and stuff. So I was like, right, well, I'm happy right now. Then got to see Silver Samurai, which is cool. And then we even get to see Omega Red. And I was like, oh, they are not wasting any time. Like, I think with these cameos as well, they weren't there for the sake of it, so we could see them return at some point, maybe in season 2, or we might see him have a further role in these last 2 episodes. I mean, just the fact Spider-Man's there. I don't know if in this universe he's part of the Avengers, but he could either fight as part of the Avengers with the X-Men, or he could just join up with the X-Men to try and help them. We don't know, but that'd be awesome. As we go back to Magneto, we get the impression he's just done, and he's going to fight for this mutant survival now. And I think this is where this conflict could start to seed through the cracks, with Professor X returning as well. This is where the X-Men might divide. So we could start at the start of the video. Some will be siding with Magneto, some will be siding with Professor Xavier. I also think, I don't know if they're going to do it, but this could be the start of Cyclops' anti-hero arc, because in the comics we have the revolutionary Cyclops, don't we? So this could be the start of it. After what's happened, he could side with Magneto, because the anti-hero Cyclops in the comics, he's essentially takes on Magneto's ideals on that. He's more of an anti-hero than obviously the leader of the X-Men. So that'd be cool if we get to see that. And I think with X-Men siding with Magneto, it could be Cyclops, it could be Rogue. Well, actually, no, we know it'd be Rogue. Even Beast. I think Beast could side with Magneto, just because of things he said in the previous episodes, which means he could be leaning more towards like Magneto's view of the world. I think characters like Wolverine, Morph, and Jean would side with Professor X, because obviously we know Xavier still believes in coexistence, whereas Magneto doesn't anymore. Which, if Jean does side with Xavier and Scott goes Magneto, that's more divide for the two of them. This threat is so big that I don't know if the X-Men will be able to fight on their own. So we could potentially see the Avengers in the episode, which would be really sweet. This is just me, just fan theory at this point. And obviously, if we do see the Avengers turn up, they'll likely side with Professor X, which means we could see these two teams of X-Men going against each other, one by Magneto, one by Professor X. So it could essentially become what it used to be back in the day, like X-Men versus the Brotherhood of Mutants. And then in some of the episodes, we do see that some of the X-Men are leading towards Magneto's point of view. I mean, Storm is a prime example. She used to be all for coexistence, but after what happened to her, obviously getting her powers taken away, she's had this first-hand experience of what humanity really thinks of mutants. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out. So yeah, there was a lot to dissect in that episode, but it's just further like pushing this plot forward. And like I said, this is where we're going to see this division start to unfold, I think, because like Magneto come in trying to live by Xavier's ideals and what his ideologies were of like human and mutant coexistence. But let's face it, after Genosha now, there's no way Magneto's still going to believe in that. And just of what he's heard with the conversation with Bastion and Val and obviously all these people that Bastion's working with, I think he's literally going to be like, I'm done with coexistence. This is going to be the fight for mutant survival now. And I think he'll return to his old ways. I mean, we could even see him go back to his OG costume from the original series. Even though I do like the Magneto costume in X-Men 97. I think if he's really going to go back, essentially going back to the dark side sort of thing, he's got to bring back the red and purple costume, so that'll be cool. Obviously, with Xavier, he popped up at the end, trying to summon all the X-Men. It's going to be really interesting to see how this folds up, because on one hand, they'll all be happy he's back, but I think on the other hand, especially people like Cyclops, he's going to have a massive issue that essentially Xavier lied to him about his death. So they have to try and resolve that really quick, while also trying to prevent this attack in the future. I mean, it couldn't even be too late at this point, because Cable's come back trying to prevent this, but the piece is already in motion now. Like, the Sentinels are already activated, they're already targeting the X-Men, and I just think we're going to see a big divide between the X-Men now. It's not going to be a case of we're all going to be backing Xavier. I do think some of them will end up following Magneto, And it's going to be ones that we didn't expect either. Because I think before this series, you would have been like, oh, no one would ever follow Magneto. But after, you know, what happened to Storm and that, things that Beast have been saying, Cyclops, even with Jubilee and Sunspot as well during the episode. Also, I didn't really mention that. But they get attacked by some Sentinels as well. And even Sunspot's own mum says you need to go with them, basically. So again, they're ones that might end up signing with Magneto, thinking that there is no such thing as coexistence anymore. It was a really awesome episode, like the cameos as well, like just in 90s Spider-Man. That was a real cool thing for me, because again, Spider-Man, the X-Men series, were two of my favourite things as a kid. So I'm like, please bring him back. So that would be awesome if he does come back. Obviously, just in Omega Red as well. That was dope, because obviously, if he's back in it, I'm like, oh, is he going to try and like scuffle Wolverine again? Because that was the whole point. He like target Wolverine back in the day, so that'd be cool. Yeah, seeing the Summers family kicking ass, that was cool as well. And then we are in for a very interesting ride for these last two parts to end this season. I do feel like it's going on such a cliffhanger, this episode. It really is. This Tolerance's Extinction, like 3-part event, I think is going to end on a massive bang. Like, I really do. Like, I don't think it's going to get resolved, but I think it's going to have such a cliffhanger. Then obviously we got to wait for season 2, which I think's been confirmed. I'm not entirely sure, but they'd be stupid if they didn't, because of how well this is done. But this is the X-Men I want to see in the live action MCU. You can't go from something like this and then like say they did a live action, it doesn't like, you know, slide, it doesn't hit, because they've done such a great job in X-Men 97. It'll be a shame if they can't translate it to live action. But yeah, this is probably one of my favourite episodes, probably my top 3 of the season so far. This is a longer video than I hoped it would be, but there was so much to unpack. I was like, I've got to talk about all this now. Like, there's so much to happen. And yeah, we'll just see what happens in the next 2 weeks, really. But that'll be it for this episode, guys. Thanks for watching as always. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe down below. Drop me a comment, let me know what you think. Did you enjoy it? What stood out for you? What do you think of the cameos? Yeah, let me know. And yeah, let's gear up for these last 2 episodes. So that'll be it for me, and I guess I'll catch you guys on the next video. Until then, peace out.